Colorado stuns TCU. Florida State runs away from LSU in the second half. And Carolina paints the town blue right here on the Three Technique.
One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome into the Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. I'm Mitch Mason, joined by Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney along as well. Fellas, it's a late night recording session. LSU and Florida State just wrapped up. Some rapid reaction coming to that game here in a minute. But week one, we've talked about this on Twitter. It wasn't the most impressive slate as far as ranked teams going up against each other, right? Teams that had that little number next to their name. But as I wrote in the headlines and review article, if you listen to the casuals that tell you that the numbers next to teams' names are the only things that make college football exciting, the only things that make tuning in on a week-to-week basis worth it, we're missing the entire point, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. And those are the same people that are driving us towards, two major conferences and no one else mattering at the end of the day, right? So don't listen to them. There were tons of great games on TV yesterday. We were really excited. We had 5 screens going for most of the day with the quad box on YouTube TV. Still not a sponsor, could be. But, I had a blast all day Saturday. The games today were really fun as well. And we still got one more tomorrow night. That's what I'm really excited about.
And, there are a lot of people complaining about this, but I don't know if it's just me. Y'all can weigh in on this too. This felt like one of the more fun weeks of college football we've had in a long time. It felt kind of unpredictable. There were a lot of things that happened that I don't think anybody really expected to happen. And there were so many points being scored. Like, I know they said scoring overall was down, but it didn't seem like that to me. There were, several teams that went over 70. 20 teams that went over 50 that I can think of right now. There were so many massive scores, huge number outputs. And they weren't playing some of the best defenses in the whole world, but it was still some awesome outputs, some really fun games to watch. And I'm hoping that this is a sign of things to come for this season.
I think more teams are feeling confident after week one than there has been in a really long time this year. You just look across the country, there are a lot of reasons for a lot of teams to be really confident coming out of their first game of the year.
Those teams do not include TCU or LSU or even South Carolina.
Unless you're wearing purple.
Or Baylor.
Or Baylor. We'll get to all of those in due time. First, of course, I want to let you know that we are brought to you by our proud partners at the Transfer Portal CFB. We've been a partner with them now for several months and loving every day of that. You can find more of our content over on the Transfer Portal CFB website. Of course, head on over, follow their social media. You can't get enough college football podcasting here on the Three Technique. They also release a preview and a recap pod over on their channels. And so we would highly, highly encourage you to go check out Liam, Dylan, and the boys over at the Transfer Portal CFB. Also, shout out to our partners and friends at homefieldapparel.com. Some of the best apparel being made on a weekly basis. They are dropping new merch every single week. You've heard us talk about it now for several weeks here. Some of the comfiest shirts, the best retro logos. If you're a college sports fan, head on over and get yourself some merch. 3Tech Pod to get 15% off your first order, or also you can order through our link on Twitter. That gets you the discount if you're a repeat customer as well. Guys, we need to start off by eating a little bit of crow here. I promised this on Twitter over the weekend. We did not consider Colorado seriously beating TCU or even threatening to beat TCU. I took them to cover the 20.5 point spread because I felt like that was a large number for a team in TCU that's breaking in a lot of transfers just like Colorado. And so I figured, well, maybe that's something that keeps it close in the end. But even then, I didn't expect Colorado to hang with the Horned Frogs the way that they did and ultimately beat TCU, last year's runners up, 45-42 in Fort Worth. Guys, the story was Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter Jr., right? Shedeur sets a program record 510 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns on the day. And Travis Hunter, all he did was play 129 snaps. He played both ways as cornerback 1. He also played as a wide receiver, had 100 yards receiving in the game, an interception on defense. Trey, let's start with you. I mean, this was something almost as unexpected as another upset that we'll talk about a little later on the banks of the Brazos, but Colorado actually did it. I said over the weekend I might have to retire the take that you can't just slap 80 college athletes together and form a winning team, because USC did it for the most part last year, and it's only week 1, but Colorado beat TCU fair and square.
That they did, and it was a track meet. It was a really, really fun college football game. There was not a lot of defense being played.
No.
Look, I expected more out of TCU's defense. I thought that would be what ultimately led them to victory in this game. I thought that would be what ultimately led them to cover the large point spread in this game. I thought it would be close for the first half, but TCU would ultimately be the more talented team, the more experienced team, the more cohesive team. And, like you said, that just turned out to not matter, because it's all about who can you get on the field. And on Saturday on the field, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter were by far the 2 best players, maybe not even just in Fort Worth, maybe in the entire country, that we saw on any football field on Saturday. So I'm really excited to see. I'm still tempering expectations a little bit. It's a long season. You can already see the cracks, and you can already see what could potentially cause Colorado to not meet what are going to be extremely lofty expectations after this win. But for right now, let's just talk about this game. The offense, it was so fun to watch. I just kept commenting to you guys while we were watching. The scheme looks so fun. They're getting guys open. They're getting guys in space. They're putting the ball in the hands of playmakers. Shedeur's making amazing decisions. You can tell that he's the prototypical coach's kid, right? He's making all the right decisions, getting the ball in the hands of the guys that need to have it in their hands. And TCU had no answers in that second half. Every time that Colorado touched the ball, you just had the feeling that they were going to score eventually. They were going to find a way. Didn't matter if it was 4th down. Didn't matter if they had a 3rd and long. They were going to find a way to convert that, and they were going to march down the field and score, probably on a really big play with some busted tackles and busted coverage. So TCU, just plain and simple, had no answer for what Colorado was throwing at them. I know Colorado didn't really have a lot of answers for what TCU was throwing at them offensively, but at the end of the day, Colorado threw the bigger punches. Colorado withstood the storm. TCU tried to come back furiously, and Shedeur Sanders really outplayed Chandler Morris down the stretch, and Colorado's hired guns through the transfer portal beat TCU's hired guns through the transfer portal head-to-head.
Yeah, Garrett, it's not like Chandler Morris played poorly necessarily. 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he did throw 2 really bad interceptions. One of them in the end zone, one of them steps away from the pearly gates when Travis Hunter made a sensational diving interception. Shedeur stepped up, and folks were commenting. I saw on the YouTube channel, folks were commenting even on Twitter, that, hey, Shedeur had offers to Power 5 institutions. Our point wasn't that Shedeur can't be a good quarterback. Our question was, is he going to step up in game 1, even in season 1, and make a statement to back up all this hype? And lo and behold, I mean, he did it. He was the gunslinger, the better player on the field that day.
Yeah, and the thing that I was thinking about Shedeur is obviously, like, he had to make that step. He had the talent, but playing your first game against Power 5 competition anywhere is tough. Nonetheless, playing TCU, whose defense did a good job down the stretch against a lot of Big 12 teams, and obviously the playoffs is a different story for them, but still played really well in spots and was able to do things effectively. Shedeur Sanders was just better, flat out. Like, that's all it really comes down to. If you look at the numbers, 55 rushing yards on the day for Colorado, but 510 passing yards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's kind of an insane number, obviously breaking the record there. But when you really looked at it too, it wasn't so much that it was just airing it out the whole time. He just knew what to do and let the playmakers do their thing. If you look at his QBR, it wasn't tops. It was, I think it was like 12th or 13th or something like that coming out of the day. And certainly not bad. But with that many yards, you'd expect a lot higher QBR. It was because he was getting the ball to guys in short situations and letting them run with it. He was just letting the guys run with it. A lot of missed tackles for TCU. Not a very good job defensively catching up with what they had going on. But it seems like they just knew who their playmakers were, and Shadur was able to go out there and distribute the ball. So fantastic job by all of them. Like Dion said at halftime, he is him. And maybe if he connected on a couple more of those deep balls that had the Heisman in his crepe, okay, whatever, that's fine. You can say all that. I'm not going to say he's a Heisman candidate, but look, start off with 510 yards in your first game. You're going to pad the stats. Go do it against somebody really good. We thought TCU maybe had a good defense, maybe not, but go do it against someone like USC or Oregon in a couple weeks, and then you're going to start getting your praise that you deserve. And I think that we all have to kind of acknowledge when we were wrong. We were kind of wrong on this one. We didn't think he'd make the jump as fast as he did. I think we all thought he had the talent in there, but I don't think any of us thought he was going to make this jump in game one. He looked amazing. And yeah, again, Travis Hunter, fantastic game for him as well. I think Jimmy Horn was the other wide receiver who had a fantastic game too. So really good across the board. Not a whole lot to say about that. Colorado absolutely took care of their business. TCU did about what we expected them to do, but Colorado was leaps and bounds ahead of where I thought they would be right now.
4 receivers for Colorado had 100-yard days. Colorado only had 2 wide receivers all of last year reach 100 yards in a single game. They do it 4 times in the season opener. Dylan Edwards, the former Notre Dame commit who decommitted from the Fighting Irish, had grown up, basically revered Dion as a father figure, commits to Colorado, has 3 touchdowns receiving on the day. Garrett, you mentioned they couldn't do anything on the ground. And I certainly don't want to cast any sort of thundercloud over this win for Colorado, but I do think it's important for us to not back off the point either. Listen, Colorado came out and did something that we did not expect, right? The offense looks legitimate. I do wonder a little bit about the defense. They couldn't stop TCU for the vast majority of that game. Now they did get some key plays as the field shortened. That defense seemed to bow up a little bit, and shout out to the Colorado secondary for doing a good job there. In the first half, I thought Colorado's battle in the trenches, they played fine, right? And my whole point was I didn't expect them to play fine. The offensive line or the defensive line, I really questioned what they had there. Now, over the course of that game, I think you saw the offensive line get exposed a little bit, right? You can't run the ball. They weren't able to move the chains in short down in distances when they just had to run the football. They had to rely on it through the air. And so that, I think, as you get deeper into the Pac-12 schedule, is certainly going to be a concern. For TCU, though, guys, TCU, we thought TCU's defense would kind of be the hallmark of this team. We were questioning what Chandler Morris would bring in. Yes, of course, a lot of talent in the wide receiver positions. JoJo Earl, they had Trey Sanders coming in from Alabama at the running back position. But we didn't know about the quarterback. The offense was fine. 42 points should win you a lot of games over the course of a season. But the fact that the defense couldn't do much, the fact that the defense looked a step slow, is a real concern for TCU. And right now, where I sit, 9-3, where I projected them to go, that might be a little optimistic from what we saw in week 1. Now, you don't just draw conclusions over the course of the entire season from week 1, but it does certainly give you a cause for pause.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for a program that historically has prided itself in its defensive back play, right? You think about all the guys from TCU that are now on NFL rosters, lighting up the NFL draft boards year in and year out, coming out of TCU, but they've got to fix it, plain and simple. It's not like they're going to find any lesser passing attacks on their Big 12 schedule. Their fans know that. They know that within the building. Historically, their track record is that they will get this fixed. We've seen difficulty at the beginning of seasons before, and we've seen that turn around throughout the year. And quite frankly, they had no idea what Colorado was going to throw at them, right? They had no idea. If you're just playing devil's advocate for TCU, it's really hard to come into game one with basically no film on a team that you're going to be facing. They had
Literally
no
no
idea
film.
what they were going to be facing. They had
Yeah.
some scouting reports on individual players maybe, but schematically with the pieces that they had, there was just no way they could prepare for what they saw. The in-game adjustments left a lot to be desired as well. So I'm not letting the coaching staff completely off the hook, but yeah, I think brighter days could be ahead for TCU, but they've really got to hit the ground running starting now.
TCU didn't run the ball very effectively. They needed to. I think earlier I was expecting them to lean on the ground game a little bit more, and Kendall Briles decided to keep airing it out. And eventually TCU fell behind the chains one too many times and just couldn't keep up with the Colorado offense. Guys, another team that couldn't keep up with an explosive offense, the LSU Tigers. Let's move over to the game that just finished, a little rapid reaction. Florida State wins 45-24. Jordan Travis put on a clinic in the second half, especially. The Noles score 31 unanswered out of the break after trailing 17-14 at half. This was a beautifully chaotic game. It was funny. I texted you guys at any one time on Twitter. You could open up the feed and there would be folks both praising how fun this game was and complaining about how sloppy it was. There were folks saying FSU and LSU won't beat insert Power 5 team that's next on their schedule. There were folks saying Florida State or LSU, depending on who had just scored, was a shoo-in for the playoff. It was an incredible convergence of takes, events. This was a really fun game until about halfway through the third quarter. Really, I guess more towards the beginning of the fourth quarter when the Noles started to pull away. Garrett, let's start with you. What stood out to you about this game? A couple of guys had really big stat sheets. We'll get into that, but just overall, kind of give me your temperature on both of these teams.
Well, I think today the best team won. I think that's what happened. I think Florida State was the better team. I think there was a lot of stuff to go wrong with LSU, and I felt like both teams kind of matched intensity early on. I felt like that's kind of what happened in the first half. Was both teams were there, both teams were gunning, making great plays. I remember there was the fumble recovery, and Florida State's going crazy, and then the next play it seemed like interception going back the other way, and it just felt like one half of the stadium's roaring, then the other half's roaring, and there we go. And so it felt really fun. To me, I thought the first half was fun. I thought that was a lot of fun watching teams make good plays on defense and come up with big stops. But as the game wore on, it just kind of felt like Florida State was able to put their will on LSU. It seemed like the runs were getting a little longer, that the holes were opening up a little quicker, that there's a little bit more yards after catch on the receivers' ends. And it just seemed like over time, things just got a little bit better and a little bit better for Florida State. And LSU kind of almost rolled over. I know they had that long touchdown at the very end, but it almost felt irrelevant at that point. It almost seemed like the Florida State guys like, let them walk it in. Let's just get the ball back and, run the clock out. So, I mean, hats off to Florida State. They played a fantastic game. I feel really good about putting them at my number 2 after that performance, because it's not to say that I don't think LSU is a good team, but when you miss a couple of players and you don't have a proven track record defending the run, it makes everything else harder on defense, right? It doesn't matter if you got a good pass defense. Doesn't matter if your DBs are supposed to be talented. Doesn't matter if your linebackers are crazy fast like Harold Perkins. Doesn't matter. When you can't stop the run up front, when you cannot win on the line of scrimmage, you're not going to win a whole lot of games, and especially not against that elite talent at the top end of the college football world.
Yeah,
Trey,
go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I'm going to cue you up here. The battle in the trenches was ugly all night long. Both defensive lines had more success than offensive lines, but the pass rush for Florida State was a lot more consistent, certainly in big moments, right? And a big part of that was Harold Perkins was not rushing off the edge as many times as it felt like he should have been. And we talked about this in the preview. LSU has him playing stand-up linebacker, playing in the middle of the field, where I think Kirk Herbstreit made the comment. LSU is taking a guy who is all-world rushing the passer, and they're putting him back in coverage where he's simply average. There were a number of points where I kind of scratched my head at what LSU was doing, but the deployment of Harold Perkins as the best weapon on the field was chief among them.
Absolutely, especially when you already knew going in that you're missing your best defensive lineman in Mason Smith, right? And we talked about how that affects the running game, but Mason Smith is no slouch in putting pressure on the quarterback as well. So LSU was still able to generate some pressure, and they were able to get to Jordan Travis a little bit, but Harold Perkins had 5 tackles, 2 solo tackles in this game. You're telling me you want your best player to impact 5 plays? Like, I know that that's not all on the scheme. That's definitely on Perkins as well. And he would tell you that he should have had more, but you got to put your best players in the best position to make plays. And one of the knocks on Brian Kelly throughout his whole coaching career at Notre Dame was just a lack of innovation, right? It was the same offense every year. It was the same scheme. It was bully ball. It was throw to the tight end. It was run the ball for 3 yards in a cloud of dust a lot of times, and eventually just outlast teams. And when you're out athleted, like you were against Florida State tonight in a lot of positions, Florida State just made a lot more big plays, and it's a lot easier to score in bunches when you can make big chunk plays and when you can, exploit matchups that you think that you can take advantage of. And LSU did not do that tonight. They were totally fine with the vanilla play calling. They were totally fine with their limited ability on offense. I think the better quarterback in Jordan Travis, this was 2 great college quarterbacks, and Jordan Travis is the better quarterback, right? He has the ability to throw downfield accurately. We just haven't seen that from Jaden Daniels, and it really limits the offense for LSU. And that kind of is the microcosm of the whole team. They were not innovative on defense either. They got pressure a little bit, but the blitz packages weren't really left a lot to be desired, and left the chess pieces are there. I'm just not convinced that they're being played in the right way.
LSU couldn't move the ball on the ground. Jaden Daniels was the leading rusher, 15 carries for 64 yards. Guys, they talked about Noah Cain being a difference maker transferring in from Penn State. 4 carries for 4 yards. He had a short yardage touchdown, but other than that, did not impact this football game. The LSU offensive line really struggled. The Florida State offensive line really struggled as well. But as you mentioned, Trey, it was clear who the better quarterback was. And Jordan Travis had his struggles in this game. Towards the end of the first half, that second quarter, when all of a sudden it felt like LSU might be able to pull away, he was struggling to keep his eyes downfield. He almost threw a terrible pick on his own 10-yard line. And so Travis did not play a perfect game, but in the end, he was able to throw the ball more accurately down the field. Keon Coleman goes off, 9 catches, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. He bullied Deuce Chestnut, the Syracuse transfer, all night long. This was a fun game to watch for those of us that were saying, now wait till you see Keon Coleman in a real offense. And tonight was that night. To the point of Jaden Daniels struggling at times, it's not like he had a bad night. 345 yards, a touchdown, a pick. He had some drops. Both teams really struggled with drops. But for LSU, for me, where they lost this game, where they lost the momentum, it was 1 drops. They had several key chances to run away and hide with this game early. And that even goes to the very start of the game. They were 0 for 3 on 4th down. 2 of those 4th down attempts were within the first, 8 minutes of the first quarter inside the red zone against
and they
Florida
had first
State.
and goal at the 1-yard line.
The 1.
And couldn't punch it in.
Yeah. So some seriously missed opportunities for the Tigers. I want to ask you guys, if LSU is able to either punch, maybe first and goal from the 1, Noah Cain's able to get into the end zone. Maybe they get a field goal in that second drive instead of wasting that away. 2, was this an area where LSU could have taken the air out of the ball had they gotten a couple of scores earlier? Or do you think Florida State's offense was going to do what it was going to do?
They could have, I guess. But when you look at just how the game played out and what we know about the 2 coaching staffs, one coaching staff made adjustments and had a fantastic second half, and the other one didn't make any adjustments and was just happy with doing the exact same things as they were in the first half. So, I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, if they punch that in or they get something happens here, that's going to happen in any game. I don't know that it would have changed the game all that much, to be quite honest. I mean, it would have changed the momentum at the beginning, but Florida State did not come out guns a-blazing. I know they scored on their first drive right after they got that huge goal line stand, but overall, they started slow in the game overall. Only 14 points in the first half. They made a ton of adjustments in the second half. I'm thinking about the two-back sets that they got on the field to kind of counteract the defensive line pressure that LSU was getting. And once Florida State started making adjustments, LSU just really had no answer for them. So I don't know that would have changed the game overall, personally.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State won this game by 3 touchdowns. You score one more on the front end, that's nice. Maybe you could take the air out of it. Maybe it changes it. But I think when you have the experience that Travis brings with them and you have the coaching staff that's familiar with them, and especially the leadership on defense, too, with as many pieces as they bring back on defense, that's not going to sway a defense just because they get down early or give up a couple of scores early. That doesn't happen when you have guys on that defense who can step up and be the voice and say, hey, guys, like, we need to step it up, right? This ain't getting it done. This ain't going to cut it. We need to go get the ball back to our offense, let them do it. That's not going to happen when you're playing those kinds of teams, right? And so I think this would have been the result anyways. Like I said, I think the better team won anyways. Maybe LSU makes it more competitive if they jump out to a bigger lead, but they scored 31 unanswered coming out of halftime. Like that's not a fluke. That's not like nothing happened, right? That's a pretty massive adjustment at halftime that, LSU simply didn't have an answer for. And it felt like the moment got too big for them and the moment seemed just fine for Florida State. And maybe that shows a difference in experience or a difference in leadership. I don't know what it is, but, at the end of the day, Florida State did what they needed to do. LSU just didn't.
Tell you what, Florida State's receiving core is scary. Between Keon Coleman, you have Johnny Wilson, who struggled with some drops tonight, no doubt, but when he was able to turn it on, 7 catches, 104 yards, a long of 22 yards. You got Jaheim Bell, the South Carolina tight end transfer, who didn't do much for the vast majority of the game, but had 2 catches late, a touchdown. I believe the last Florida State touchdown was thrown to Jaheim Bell. And then you've got Lawrence Toafili, who is, a running back by trade, but boy, he's really good at coming out of the backfield, running those halfback angle routes and getting open over the middle of the field, running a wheel route as well. There's so many weapons for Jordan Travis to hit and execute with. And I think Florida State is going to be a team to watch every single week, appointment viewing the rest of the season. Before we move up the coast to the Queen City, just a quick hitter from each of you. Garrett, let's start with you. What constitutes success for Brian Kelly and LSU the rest of this year?
I think you got to get back to Atlanta. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think getting back to Atlanta, playing in the championship game, beating Alabama, taking care of business with the rest of the SEC West, not losing that late game to A&M at the end of the year, even if you have it wrapped up. That's what looks like success. Even if they don't win it, I mean, obviously you would prefer to win the SEC, prefer to win your conference, get to the playoff. But even if you don't win it, go back to the championship game, have another chance there, and show your fans that you haven't, completely fallen apart just because of an early season, getting smacked in the face, right? You got to get back on the ball, got to get back to playing good on the offensive line. But if you can do that, go win some games and show your fans that it's not all doom and gloom. You can get back from this.
Yeah, we said before this game, before in our preview, we said that neither one of these teams is going to be eliminated from the playoff contention with a loss here. We saw LSU lose to Florida State last year and still get to Atlanta. So that's ultimately the goal. And I'm with you, Garrett. I think that for that fan base, you have to make it to Atlanta for it to be a successful season. At the bare minimum, I don't even think they were happy with making it to Atlanta last year. They kind of gave him a pass since it was year one, and they were excited to get there because it was year one. But, if you read the tea leaves of that fan base, I don't think that they were necessarily happy with the outcome down the stretch of that season last year. So there's a lot of questions being asked in Baton Rouge right now. TigerDroppings.com, the server has crashed, I'm seeing on Twitter. So the seat's starting to get warm, fellas. That you got to win, and you got to win quick in Baton Rouge to appease that fan base. And back-to-back losses to Florida State, and this one just not even being competitive in the second half is not going to endear yourself to that family.
I'm thrilled I changed my pick after all offseason saying I feel like the ball bounces LSU's way. It didn't bounce. It didn't go Florida State's way for the reasons that I kind of outlined. The passing attack just bludgeoned LSU's secondary into compliance, which, to be fair, was one thing that we highlighted, right? As a concern for LSU. You only had one starter back. The rest of the guys were transfers or new faces. and they looked like they need some seasoning for sure. So, season's not over for LSU, but my goodness, it is a unforeseen roadblock that I don't think a lot of LSU fans were counting on. I think a lot of Cajuns were expecting to take care of business tonight, and it was the exact opposite. Let's head on up the coast. As I mentioned, Carolina is Tar Heel Blue tonight as North Carolina beats South Carolina 31-17. North Carolina dominated this game, guys, especially in the trenches. The offensive line for South Carolina and the defensive line for that matter, we were really concerned about heading into this game. What is the offensive line going to do in a patchwork fashion? Can the defensive line get any sort of pressure on Drake May? The answers to those questions were not all that encouraging. In fact, I was listening to the South Carolina broadcast driving back from our watch party Saturday night, and guys, I mean, they were depressed. The score, they only lost by 14, excuse me, but in reality, it felt like a much larger gap. South Carolina gave up 9 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, and rushed for a total of -2 yards. North Carolina's defense stepped up in a way that none of us expected. We thought this was going to be an offensive shootout. In fact, Spencer Rattler was actually the better quarterback in this game. 350 yards passing, couple of touchdowns, really had a sensational game, but he was let down by the rest of a roster that we were concerned was not as complete as kind of the Twitter momentum would have you believe. Trey, I'm really concerned about South Carolina. On the other hand, I may believe that North Carolina can weather this ACC schedule and be a threat to reach the conference championship game.
Oh, yeah. If the defense plays like they did last night, then the ACC needs to be put on notice that this is a true championship contender in Chapel Hill. Mitch, you highlighted the offensive side of the ball for South Carolina. The defense wasn't any better. The defensive line, the front seven, just got bullied by the North Carolina offensive line, plain and simple. No sacks, 1 tackle for loss throughout the entire game. I know they got a couple takeaways from the secondary. We highlighted that the secondary could be a problem for Drake May, and that proved to be a little bit true. But listen, it was not as close as the score indicated. It was close throughout the first half. North Carolina played with their food a little bit, but when the rubber met the road in the second half, North Carolina just put their boot on the neck of the Gamecocks and stomped them into the ground. And it was domination up front on both sides of the ball. South Carolina did not look like an SEC team. They did not look like the team with the SEC patch on their jersey. That definitely looked like North Carolina in this one.
Garrett, it's hard to win in this league if you can't run, if you don't have an offensive line to pass protect or to move the pile and allow that ground game to get going. South Carolina was abysmal on 3rd down. They didn't convert a 4th down in 4 attempts. I think Gamecock fans might have to really take a long look in the mirror here and figure out, okay, what's our identity going to be? Because if it's just Spencer Rattler running around and chucking the ball downfield 50 times a game, that's probably not going to work week in and week out.
Yeah, especially when you get to a better, defensive output. I know that UNC played great getting to the quarterback, but not a great effort on the back end, right? Giving up 353 to Spencer Rattler isn't wonderful. And you could say that that's partially just because the run game wasn't working and that's all they had and they played from behind and everything else, but it's still not good defensively if you're looking at that. But South Carolina, like you're saying, Mitch, they're going to play some better defenses. They're going to play some better, secondaries, and they're going to have to figure something out to fill up the gaping holes in the ship if they're, going to float through the rest of this SEC schedule. I don't know what the answer is right now. I know that you don't want to overreact to things. Maybe it's just as much as saying, okay, well, that didn't work. We had the wrong game plan. Scrap that. Back to the drawing board. Let's go to the next game. It might be as easy as that, but man, like that kind of a game does not sit with you well. That kind of a game is not going to be something that you feel good about, going forward in the next couple of weeks. And so, especially looking at, and this is something we'll talk about later, but looking at some of the score outputs from SEC teams and some of the massive numbers put up by a lot of those teams that are on the schedule, Yeah, it's not wonderful right now to be a Gamecock fan. And that's also noting that UNC probably didn't play their best game. Drake May turned the ball over twice, wasn't remarkable through the air. You play a quarterback with a better performance. You play a quarterback who plays a little bit better, brings his A game. Things could get ugly there in South Carolina for the Beamer ball.
So unfortunate for Spencer Rattler. He really has a good game. Nine yards a pass, but his QBR at 44. He doesn't throw a touchdown. He doesn't throw a pick. Xavier Leggett had a great game. 9 catches, 178 yards. He looked like a dude for South Carolina. But the fact that they never once got a passing touchdown into the end zone is really concerning.
Yep.
For the Gamecocks. Both their touchdowns came on the ground, short yardage situations. DeCarrion Joyner had a 6-yard scamper. Juju McDowell, a 2-yard scamper. That's it. That was the rushing output for South Carolina. So, certainly I don't know if it's a rivalry game. Both teams played hard. It was very clear North Carolina was the better team on that field. I think stock up for North Carolina, stock down for South Carolina. But once again, week 1, a lot of hiccups to iron out. A lot of things can change between now and the end of the regular season. I do feel pretty good, though, that the issues we highlighted in this game came to fruition, right? It feels like we have a pulse on what determines success for each of these teams. I think the ceiling for North Carolina is just so much higher at this point than it is for South Carolina. As I told you guys, and I think we talked about this in the SEC preview, for me, South Carolina is a 2024, 2025 team, not a 2023 team. I think everyone's crowning them just a year or two early. We'll see what Shane Beamer can put together heading into the rest of this season, and then obviously the next couple of seasons as his recruiting classes get on campus. Those are our big 3 games that we highlighted. Obviously, 3 of the biggest storylines. Colorado burst onto the scene. They wormed their way all the way to the top spot. Guys, let's go down now conference scoreboards. Let's start out with the Pac-12, first conference to start 13-0 in the modern era. If you had bet me a lot of money that I could guess what conference that would be, I would never have taken the Pac-12. But because USC is now 2-0, Pac-12 has started the season 13-0. And let's start first with Utah and Florida. A low-scoring game, 14th ranked Utes welcomed Florida to town on Thursday night. And boy, Utah's defense did exactly what we thought it would do. It was physical, it was nasty, and it harassed Graham Mertz all night long. Graham Mertz actually kind of looked decent the first, 2-3 drives of the game. But Trey, after that, there was just nothing that went right. Florida played undisciplined. They had some really silly penalties. And Billy Napier, for all the staff that he has, right, the largest staff in the country as far as support staff goes, associate head coaches, etc., they looked underprepared. And just like the guys were not ready to play against a Utah team that was missing their starting quarterback.
And a lot of the penalties they had were game management penalties on the coaching staff, like 2 guys wearing the same number on a punt return, right?
Yeah,
that
unreal.
Extends a drive and gives Utah a touchdown. It's just the jokes write themselves when you have the largest staff in the country and you having things like that happen. And speaking of teams that just didn't look like SEC teams or didn't look like they should have an SEC patch on their jersey, Florida's another team that just got bullied up front by Utah's defensive line. They couldn't run the ball. 13 total rushing yards. Graham Mertz was forced to pass the ball 45 times. I don't think that Florida's going to win a lot of games if Graham Mertz has to pass the ball 45 times this year. And I think that the coaching staff would tell you that too. So nothing was working on the ground. They were forced into it, and credit Utah for having a fantastic game plan for Florida this year. And look, I think they had 3 trips to the red zone before the very end of the game, and they came away with 3 points. So it was just a comedy of errors for the Florida Gators up in Salt Lake City. Game they really want to forget really quickly, and a game they're going to have to forget because the schedule doesn't get much easier throughout the rest of the year.
Garrett, you were saying this Utah defense might be the best that Kyle Whittingham had ever had. The defensive line is just nasty. And then you get Bryson Barnes and Nick Johnson both playing kind of intermittent roles at the quarterback spot. They were very solid. What did you take away from Utah after this opening win?
Well, what I took away from Utah is they're going to be really good this year when Cam Rising gets back, and that's maybe a if as opposed to a win because he said he would be back for week 1. Now we don't know, anyways. But no, I mean you come out there, they had to hear all last season that they went down to the swamp and they got bullied and they weren't ready, they're frauds, they're not tough, and that's their identity. That's what they build their brand on, that they're tough, they can kind of be the physical team out there in the Pac-12. And to hear that all offseason clearly did not sit well with them because they came out and they punched Florida in the mouth and they were clearly the more physical team. I was so impressed, just the gumption to come out there on that first play on offense and hit a 70-yard bomb.
That was awesome.
That was amazing. I leapt off the couch. I was like, yes, Utah, we are back. Let's do this. I was so excited. I mean, it's just fun, right? Because, you're saying you're missing Cam Rising. How are they going to move the football? I thought they were going to have to lean way heavier on the run than they did. And what they do, they come out there first play, 70 yards. I was like, wow, you got to say, he is on pace to have the greatest season of all time through one pass attempt. Like, he was incredible. So, no, I was really impressed with Utah. Obviously, maybe not the highest scoring output for a team that averaged over 40, I think, last season. But you got to give Florida a little credit. They did play some good defense against some backup quarterbacks at times. And so, there's some mess ups, but give them the credit. They played okay defense against some good Utah players there. So I'm excited to see what happens for the Utes going forward. I'm excited to see what happens when Cam's back, but we'll have to wait and see and keep playing from there.
I thought running backs were going to be a big story of that game. Jaquindon Jackson, 5 carries, 15 yards. Trevor Etienne, 7 carries, 25 yards. I could not imagine a game taking place where the running backs were not featured, and yet that wasn't the case at all. Utah didn't need to go to the running backs all that consistently, and Florida couldn't get anything going because their offensive line was getting bullied just about every snap. Trey, you mentioned Mertz had to throw the ball 44 times. Not a recipe for success for the Florida Gators this year, next year, maybe any year under Billy Napier. A team that does want to throw the ball 44 times, as many times as they possibly can. Let's go to number 10, Washington, blowing the doors off Boise State, 56-19. Trey, this was a close game early on. In fact, Boise State shut out Washington in the fourth quarter, but Michael Penix Jr. decided to launch his Heisman campaign in the second quarter. They scored 28 points, went on to obviously blow it away. 450 yards, 5 touchdowns for Michael Penix Jr. Every time he drops back, it looks like you could have a Twitter clip ready to go.
Absolutely. And their offense is just tailor-made for his skill set. They love to air it out deep. He loves to chuck it up to his talented receivers. And they create a ton of mismatches down the field that Boise just eventually had no answers for. Boise did play tough. I want to give hats off to them because they were outmanned and outmatched. Taylon Green, struggled through the air, but I think they should have given him some more opportunities to make some plays with his legs early. I think that would have gotten him settled in a little bit more with a hostile crowd, but Washington was just too good, and they're still, looking good, looking on track to, push for not just a Pac-12 championship, but I really do think that they have a great shot to sneak into the college football playoff.
I would just like to take a moment to recognize Rome Odunze. 7 catches, 132 yards, and a tutter. Listen, I got a lot of hate on a Twitter thread when I picked Odunze to win the Biletnikoff Award. Everyone else and their mother picked Marvin Harrison Jr., and I got accused of being different just for click's sake. Well, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 2 catches for 18 yards yesterday, Mr. Twitter person. Odunze is a feature of that offense, and it's not just going to be Rome. It's going to be Polk. It's going to be McMillan. You have so many weapons up there in Washington that the ball is going to get distributed. I mean, heck, Penix Jr.'s throwing for 450 yards. That's a warm-up. I promise you that will not be the high water mark that he throws for throughout the course of this year. But you have Odunze putting up numbers like that all year long. He will be a finalist for the Biletnikoff. Wasn't doing it for clicks. Doing it because I know ball, and I'm really excited to watch the Washington Huskies this season. Garrett, the rest of the Pac-12 slate was a little bit unremarkable. You have number 15 Oregon doing unspeakable things to Portland State. They hang 81 on directional state.
Hope that
Cal
check
beats
cashed
you in.
quick, man. That
Yeah, poor host to say the least. Cal puts up 58 on North Texas to beat the Mean Green handily. USC blows out Nevada 66-14. Washington State 50. Colorado State 24. UCLA kind of struggles with Coastal 27-13, but eventually they pull it away. Trey, unfortunately, the over did not, in fact, hit in that game. I can't believe we kept it to, 40 points? But indeed we did. Arizona 38, Northern Arizona 3, and Oregon State beats San Jose State 42-17. Garrett, as you look through the rest of those games, is there anything that stands out to you from the Conference of Champions?
Well, a couple things. Number one, Cal blowing up was clearly not something I think any of us expected. Massive output for them. We'll see if they can keep that up against a team with a pulse or a fan base, but we'll see what happens for Cal going forward in the season.
Green alone, sir.
Hey, look, I've got some insiders on the scene. Nobody was at that football game. So there's
100. It was 110. I don't necessarily blame them.
I wouldn't blame them either. Oregon, look, it's not impressive to beat the crap out of a 5-year-old. So like that's not something I would encourage. But that's what Oregon decided to do. They decided to hang 81 on Portland State because they felt bad or something. Maybe Bo Nix woke up on the wrong side of the bed. He was amazing, sensational. Bo was fantastic.
They went for 2 on their first touchdown, and I made the comment that wasn't very nice, and they were just getting started.
Right. I mean, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's not very nice to your friends down there in Portland. And then obviously, you're looking at USC. That last week, not a great performance defensively. This week, getting back on top of it, 14 points allowed to Nevada. It's going to have to be better for them on defense. Obviously, that was one thing that we talked about, and it was certainly better against Nevada. Let's see what happens going forward, but they still roll on offense. 66 feels like a pedestrian number for them at this point. So good job, USC. You're doing your thing again, and let's see if you can match some of that defense against better opponents later in the year.
Yeah,
can we talk about DJU really quickly?
Well, I was going to give him a shout out. Yep, DJU at Oregon State. Boy, he turned it on today.
20 of 25, 239 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, a 92.9 QBR. A lot of people were saying that they didn't like the scheme fit that they were trying to run at Clemson for DJU, and that after Tony Elliott left for Virginia, that's really when things started to spiral for him. We'll see. I don't know. It's just one game. It's just San Jose State, not the most electric competition. We've seen this from DJU before against not great secondaries, but I'm excited. My expectations have been heightened just a bit for what we can see from him at Oregon State this year. Kind
of rude of future Mountain West champion Oregon State to light up their conference foe like that, but it is what it is. It was so awkward. The CBS crew was like the D tier CBS crew. They had the brand new Mountain West commissioner in. They asked her, I believe, 3 questions. And then the guy was like, all right, well, thanks for joining us. And the interview lasted less than 5 minutes. It was, and all they asked her was like, hey, so how nervous are you about the Mountain West? Or like, what conversations are you having? It's just very, very strange. But DJU was the show. And boy, he did not disappoint. Let's go on over to the SEC. A couple of top 5 teams. Let's start there. The reigning national champions, Georgia Bulldogs, 48, UT Martin, 7. Also, I want to lump in Alabama, the 4th-ranked team in the country, 56. They scored 56 over Middle Tennessee State, who manages just 7. The kind of common thread between these two teams is they're breaking in a new starting quarterback, Carson Beck for Georgia, Jalen Milroe for Alabama. Both teams had very sluggish starts in the first half. Now, eventually went on to put away their respective teams. But is there any concern for you guys on offense for either the Georgia Bulldogs or the Alabama Crimson Tide? Alabama obviously has to get ready for Texas at home this next week. Garrett, I felt like Jalen Milroe kind of salvaged it. He only threw for 195 yards, but Alabama's not going to run the same offense that they did last year where they're going to spread it out and air it down the field. In fact, Jalen Milroe, within the scheme that he played in, I thought looked pretty good.
Yeah, and a lot better than we thought, right? We were all
Yeah.
expecting this to look like what we saw last year. Apparently, he made a jump this year. Maybe Tommy Reese is the GOAT, and we just don't know it. But we'll see. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. Yeah, I don't think so either. Well, yeah, I just thought, look, when you're looking across the league, there were massive outputs against pretty much everybody. You also notice almost nobody was good on the opponent's side. So, it's early. It certainly looked like it worked. It's better than it not looking like it works, right? It's better than coming out there and missing a bunch of passes and everything else. But I'm curious. There were a couple balls that he threw that ended up scoring where I wondered, is that a little overthrown or is that a little underthrown? And you're just getting away with it because you don't have as good a secondary play. Like there was one where the receiver had to kind of run in a few yards, and I think okay, if you're playing LSU, A&M, Arkansas later in the season, that ball's probably picked. I wonder if that can continue. But for now, he looks pretty good. I kind of expected Carson Beck to look good, but I think it was just kind of a how fast can he settle into that. But Milroe a lot better than I thought he was going to be.
Beck started slowly, and I think he picked it up as the game went on. He threw for almost 300 yards, didn't throw an interception, so a lot of green flags for me there. Vandergriff came in as well and played pretty well in his limited action. I think he only threw 3 passes, but I think for Carson Beck, it's going to depend on can he find some chemistry with some of the wide receiver options. We know that Brock Bowers is going to be there, but I want to see how quickly he develops chemistry with the wide receiver options. And, if they can develop a true alpha wide receiver, look out in this offense. Just a guy that can take over the game and take some defenders, take some attention off of Brock Bowers.
Guys, just a moment to celebrate the positivity that we witnessed in College Station. Texas A&M hangs 52 on the New Mexico Lobos, 52-10, the final score there. Connor Wegman led the country on Saturday in QBR. He threw for 5 touchdowns in just 3 quarters. And A&M's offense, I think, went a long way to silence the haters that said, oh, Jimbo and Bobby Petrino will never work together. Again, week 1, I hear that. But A&M had not done something like that in quite a long time. In fact, we were remarking as we were watching that Wegman made it look so effortless, so easy. Even when he was under pressure, his off-platform throws, his ability to keep his eyes downfield and find his receiver, and not just find a receiver, but drop it in a bucket at times. It's something that we haven't seen in over a decade in Aggie land. I think for me, the questions kind of shift more away from the offense. I'm curious to see how the running game goes, but they shift away from the offense and more towards the defensive side of the ball as they prepare to go to Miami.
Definitely. And I think, the secondary, we commented that it can only go down from being the number 1 pass ranked defense, but Josh DeBerry, I think, was a real bright spot. Had a sack out of the secondary, had an interception. Really nice game for him in his debut coming over from Boston College. And look, I think the linebacker play is a little concerning. The defensive line is, of course, going to be a bunch of monsters, but when the offense puts up 52, there's not a lot to complain about, right? First time since 2019, so many sighs of relief coming out of College Station. I think we could hear them all the way from Dallas as the first 5 drives were punched in for touchdowns in College Station. If they're doing that on offense, that makes the defense just be able to breathe a little bit easier, and it's going to make things a lot more fun to watch in College Station.
Garrett, it feels like for the first time in a long time as well, A&M has a really good wide receiver core to go to bat with. It's hard to just target one guy and feel like your secondary is secure.
Yeah, it's pretty stacked there. Noah Thomas had a breakout party. Lots of people are very excited about him and his development, what he could do. He had 3 touchdown catches. Didn't even lead the team in terms of receiving yardage. That was Evan Stewart. He caught a whole bunch of balls for a whole bunch of yards and a couple of touchdowns. And that's not to mention guys last year that had massive breakouts as well. Moose Muhammad had a big breakout last year. He had a touchdown, but only, I think, 12 yards receiving or something small like that. And Anais obviously wasn't a huge factor in terms of the passing game, but still had a couple of catches. end of the day, I think you have to look at this and say that this is a much better, much revamped offense. A lot of people, I know, we all know that a lot of people had tweets saved from this offseason ready to talk about how this offense is the same. I told you Petrino was ever something neck brace, right? Everything was going to be, the all time to hate on A&M and their offense again. And I get it because it was garbage last year. It was atrocious. It hasn't been that good for a couple of years, but it really looks like they were elite, maybe really, really good, not quite elite, but really good quarterback play, some really good, receiver talent, maybe just a couple things away from having a really good offense. I don't know if it's Petrino. I don't know if Wigman took a step. I don't know if it's just the fact that they know who their good receivers are and they're playing them now. Maybe it was just the fact that those 18-year-olds are 19 this year. I don't know what it is, but clearly something is working in Aggie land. Is it against New Mexico? Yeah. But there were some really good place balls. There was some really, really good deep touch from Wigman that I don't care who you're playing. I don't care if it's Miami next week. I don't care if it's Bama's corners in a month or so. Those passes get completed against really good corners. So excited to see what happens. And we'll keep rolling with that. Maybe that'll silence some haters.
Elsewhere around the league, Kentucky beats Ball State 44-14. Devin Leary, a little underwhelming to start. Only 241 yards, touchdown, and a pick, but Kentucky eventually pulls away. Missouri beats San Diego State. I knew I was going to do that. South Dakota State, 35-10. Number 12, Tennessee, boat races Virginia 49-13. That was the first game that Virginia had played since the tragic shooting last year that canceled the rest of their season. Number 22, Ole Miss beats Mercer 73-7. Auburn wins Hugh Freeze's debut 59-14 over UMass. Mississippi State drubs Southeastern Louisiana 48-7, and Vandy takes down Alabama A&M 47-14. Let's move over to the Big Ten, where we had some headlines for sure in the Big Ten. I think the Pac-12 and the Big Ten maybe two of the most newsworthy conferences in week one. Number 7, Penn State beats West Virginia 38-15. Trey, the headlines to me were Drew Aller's really good. 325 yards, 3 touchdowns, did not turn the ball over. But also West Virginia, like you actually said in the preview, you didn't end up getting the cover, but you said West Virginia is going to do some weird things on offense. And West Virginia, I didn't get the feeling that they were pulling out all of this trickeration, but pleasantly surprised by what we saw from Garrett Green, the ground game as well, 146 yards for the Mountaineers. Listen, you only score 15 points in a really tough road environment, but it wasn't a total disaster. And maybe for the Mountaineers, that's a step in the right direction.
I felt so vindicated when they ran that little ring around the rosy thing for the last 2-point conversion. I was like, look, what did I tell you guys? Neil Brown.
That's so stupid.
Neil Brown does not care this year. He is just going to do whatever he wants. And yeah, maybe that's going to equate to some wins down the road against less talented teams, but Penn State is just way too talented. Almost got the cover that I wanted, but Penn State scores a late bad beat touchdown that really wasn't necessary. Thank you, James Franklin. But we'll see. We'll see how far that carries them this year. I don't think that it's going to lead to a ton of wins, but it could steal 1 or 2 in the Big 12.
Number 3, Ohio State beats Indiana 23-3. Garrett, we're used to this score being much higher. Indiana hadn't beaten Ohio State since the 80s, and that obviously will have to wait at least another year. But Ohio State's offense was very underwhelming in this game. The Ryan Day slander is back. The offense looked out of sync, and you didn't even get your best player involved. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Marvin Harrison Jr., 2 catches for 18 yards. Do you put the blame more on Kyle McCord or on Ryan Day and the offensive scheme?
I'm going to put the blame on game one. I know it's not necessarily like me to defend the Buckeyes on this podcast.
No, it's not. Somebody saved this.
But I'm going to be nice to Joe for today. We're going to be nice. Look, you're breaking in a new quarterback. And I know that the only thing that I heard in the offseason was, how could you think this is new? He's been in the system for years. He's going to know exactly what he's doing. And I said, it's going to take him a minute. But the open is pretty soft. Ohio State doesn't have to play a good team for a month, you played Notre Dame a little bit, but seems like for the first month of the season, it's a soft open to the schedule. And he's going to have a few games to really, open things up, right? He's going to have a couple of games to figure things out, look at some tape, and figure out what he did wrong. And look, if you're me, I would have rather had the game Ohio State had than the game that Alabama had, because there's more things to correct on tape in this game than there is in what Jalen Milroe had or with what Carson Beck had at Georgia, right? These are new quarterbacks trying to break into their system, and I'd rather have them learn from mistakes early so they can see what they did wrong and make those corrections than just have hey, you played a bad team and you went off. Congratulations. Now, I know that's not what Ohio State fans want to hear. Ohio State fans wanted to see them score 50-plus and have no issues and everything was great, but at the same time, that's not what's going to happen when you get punched in the face against Notre Dame. That's not what's going to happen when you get punched in the face against Michigan or against Penn State or one of these other big teams that you're playing this year. You have to be careful. You have to be aware of your mistakes early. I'd much rather have a week to prepare for that or a couple weeks to prepare for that than have to talk to him at halftime in one of those games and say, hey, by the way, they're doing this and you can't do that anymore, right? And so, look, was it amazing? No. Are there probably a lot of reasons to be concerned if you're Ohio State? Yeah. But right now, breathe in, breathe out, deep breath. Let's slow it down for a second. You still have one of the most talented wide receiver cores. You still have one of the most talented rosters. Your defense held them to 3 points all game. Let's relax, right? You scored not very much in the first game last year, and then you ended up in the playoffs. So let's relax. Let's take it easy. Things are going to be okay for the Ohio State Buckeyes fans.
That is hands down the nicest thing you've ever said about Ohio State. So
I'm trying to be better this year,
Buckeye fans, I mean, savor this moment because this is a new one.
A new man.
If you get boat raced by Notre Dame, I'm not going to be nice.
That's fair. And hey, the way that Sam Hartman's slinging it, that
Notre
may
Dame.
be a possibility.
Look out.
Elsewhere, you guys tell me where we want to go. Trey, Iowa beats Utah State 24-14. A little bit of history there for Kirk Ferentz.
No way
and
that's
boys.
true.
Fresno State upsets Purdue 39-35. And then, of course, there's the Nebraskaning that I'm terming. They lose a game in a way that only Nebraska could lose. They lose to Minnesota on Thursday night, 13-10. Which of those three games kind of tickles your fancy?
Let's talk Iowa real quick because Nebraska's trusting the process. I don't think anybody went into that game. They thought they could win as that game developed, but I don't think we're really, it's not trashing the program. It's not going to burn the program to the ground that they lost. Obviously, the jokes write themselves at this point about Nebraska in one-score games, but we're not going to go there. There's no way that stat's true, Mitch. That Iowa hasn't scored on an opening drive in 32 years until
of the first game.
Right. Even that.
But yes,
opening drive of the season. It's been 32 years since they scored on an opening drive of the season.
That's correct. The last time that Iowa scored on the opening drive of a season, which they did it this year, Cade McNamara threw a 37-yard touchdown pass. The last time Vaunted Hawkeyes had done that was 1991, gentlemen.
Wow,
it's the first time in Kirk Ferentz's illustrious career, 25-year career at the helm, that he has ever done that. So, if you're
were any of us around in 1991? Because I know I was.
I was not. If you are new to college football, if you are new to the Shadow Realm, to Iowa, the lack of offense is not necessarily a new thing for the Hawkeyes. So, listen, they raced out to a 14-point lead. I think Iowa Hawkeye fans were maybe fanning themselves, getting a little hot and bothered over all the points early in the game, and then they only scored 10 in the remaining three quarters. Despite a 14-0 eruption, they still fall a point shy of Brian Ferentz's quota of 25 points, a game that he has to reach to keep his contract alive. Trey, it felt like we were going to start building up some cushion here, but that's honestly shame on us.
Oh, yeah. We should have known that someone was going to put in a call, say that wasn't allowed in the state of Iowa, that 14 points is way too many for one quarter. We need to slow it down a little bit. There's children in that stadium, Mitch. There's children. We can't.
And outside of the stadium,
and outside,
waving to folks at the Kinnick Wave.
Well, yes, and we can't have any of those children inside or outside of the stadium. We can't have their dreams and their innocence just shattered by, embarrassing the other team by scoring that many points. So we can't do that. This is Iowa. We can't have that in our wholesome situation. So it's a family affair at Iowa.
How is Iowa supposed to win without punting, guys? I mean, that was a question they were not prepared to answer in the first quarter. But they do get the win by 10 over Utah State. Um, Garrett boy, Purdue had a chance, and I feel like in West Lafayette, we call them the spoiler makers. Mikey Keene threw the Uno reverse card and threw for 366 yards and 4 touchdowns. Eric Brooks had himself a day, 9 catches, 166 yards, and a tutter. The big stat for me, Garrett, I don't know if it's this easy to win when it's this way. 13 minutes of time of possession edge for the Fresno State Bulldogs. Is breaking a new offense, a new head coach. When you're down by an entire quarter in ball possession, that's not a recipe for success.
Well, and that's how that offense is supposed to work. You're not supposed to hold on to the ball for very long, anyways. But yeah, you got to go score. And so, 35, not a bad offensive output, but defense was just non-existent there. So, get your team back on the field, Purdue defense, and maybe we'll say something. I said before the game that Purdue might be a little bit slept on, but maybe they were just asleep. I don't know what the deal was with Purdue. So just nice to see that the Shadow Realm is back. I'm kind of happy to see that there were some weird outcomes back there in the Shadow Realm. I'm glad to see it for another season. I hope you guys are with me on that one. I'm excited to maybe go take the plunge on this division one more time.
Yeah, Illinois Toledo got weird, and Toledo
Yeah.
almost pulled the upset there. Wisconsin started slow. It was a great day all around for the Shadow Realm.
Yeah.
We mentioned it. Minnesota 13, Nebraska 10. Nebraska outplayed Minnesota basically the entire game. Minnesota's working in a new offense without Tanner Morgan, Mo Ibrahim. In fact, did you guys know that PJ Fleck has a losing record if Tanner Morgan is not starting at quarterback? That was a concerning stat for the Gophers, but they do end up winning thanks in part to, once again, turnovers for the Cornhuskers. A fumble by Anthony Grant on the penultimate drive, horrific. You don't even do this in NCAA 14. Interception thrown by Jeff Sims, his third of the day, throwing late over the middle. Ultimately sealed the deal for the Huskers. For our Nebraska fans, we won't torture you any more than that. Number 2, Michigan rolls over East Carolina, 30-3. Not much to say other than the weird tribute to Jim Harbaugh, the free Harbaugh shirt worn by JJ McCarthy. I don't know if anyone informed him that's a self-imposed sanction. So, take it up with the athletic department, I guess. Wisconsin, Trey, you mentioned a slow start. Tanner Mordecai did not have a good game, but the Badgers do win 38-17 over Buffalo. Michigan State also overcomes a slow start and a deficit to the Chips of Central Michigan. They eventually win 31-7. Illinois beats Toledo in a last-second field goal, 30-28, and Maryland starts the road to 10 wins, according to Garrett, strong, and they beat Townsend 38-6.
Hey, Talia looked great in that game. Give that man some credit. I said he was a great quarterback. I said he's best in Big Ten. I might be hanging on to that a little bit longer. Had a big scramble to score at the very beginning of the game. Tossed a few more. I'm vibing with it, man. Go Terps.
Garrett, you might look good against Towson in your current state playing quarterback. I'm not going to lie, though.
Hey, yeah. I mean, even with the bionic arm, yeah, we can maybe do something about that.
He's a great quarterback, though. I'm excited to see him play this.
He is very good.
And the script jerseys look phenomenal.
Oh, they were clean.
In both the red and the black that they'll show us later on this season.
Mm-hmm.
2 more conferences to get through, as well as some Group of 5 stuff, so we'll pick up the pace a little bit. The Big 12, highlighted by 2 upsets, and they're not of the friendly variety. If you are a fan of the Big 12, Wyoming knocks off Texas Tech 35-33 in double overtime. Texas State beats Baylor 42-31 on the banks of the Brazos. Trey, Texas State gets their first Power 5 win in program history. The G.J. Kinney era is well underway, and T.J. Finley looked like the quarterback that Auburn and LSU had hoped for.
Yeah, TJ Finley was awesome in this game. I can't remember the guy's name, but the catch down the sideline might be a catch of the year candidate already in week 1. No gloves, going up and grabbing it, keeping the drive alive for his team. Awesome day for the guys from San Marcos. Like when I talk about like a sleeping giant program, one of the biggest schools in the state of Texas, never done anything at the top level of college football. I think they have a national championship at D2, but just never really done anything since they moved up to Division 1. But maybe they're starting to build something. Maybe, Jake Spavital had a really dumb recruiting strategy, just completely abandoned high school recruiting, and maybe Texas State's starting to turn a corner. Maybe this is another sign of using the transfer portal to completely reinvigorate a team.
Garrett, I'm going to toss you the Texas Tech grenade because you were
I'm
really
too
high
sad
on
to
them.
talk about it, so thank you for doing that.
Well, it's the benefits of a 3-man show. Sometimes the wheel of unfortune doesn't spin to you. Tech just couldn't get the offense going in this game. I mean, Tyler Shuck did not look sharp. The running game was non-existent, and you would have spurts of success for the Red Raiders. Then you look up and suddenly it's 3rd and 14, and they're not able to convert. How concerned are you for Texas Tech after dropping a game up in Laramie?
I mean, if you're looking at the way that a lot of us projected them to be, then the alarm meter is going off right now with sounds. The red is flashing. I mean, how do you go up to Wyoming and lose that game, and then we're still going to sit here and defend you guys as going to compete for your conference? Might upset the 81-point stomp on a 5-year-old Oregon Ducks, right?
That's me.
I just don't understand like how you're supposed to defend that. Like Oregon's not going to be nice to you either. They're not going to come to your house and be nice. The crowd will be fired up, but man, what a disappointment, right? Just what an absolute disappointment from Texas Tech. Like you're saying, Mitch, just completely inconsistent on offense. There were moments it looked good, and then it just fell apart. What that tells you is that it's there. It's not like you don't have anything on offense. It's not like you don't have something that can go right. Was it the focus? Was it the fact that there was a long delay at the beginning of the game, and so they got started late and they just weren't, like locked in? I don't know what it was, but big chance for the staff now to try to figure out what that issue was, get things straightened out. And man, I just find myself not knowing what to say about this one. If I'm being honest, it's inexcusable. That's what happens when you have these big time upsets. It was close. No cigar. At least he didn't get stomped by a smaller team like Baylor did. But yeah, it's just a tough scene for Texas Tech right now, and a lot to fix very quickly.
3 missed field goals. They jumped out to a 17-0 lead, and then the offense just completely shut down until they got a field goal to tie it and send it to overtime. Yep. And look, weird things happen when power teams go to a G5 stadium. That just is a cardinal rule of college football. Weird things happen when it's a Power 5 at a G5. But even all that being said, this is still a game that Texas Tech feels like they should have won, and they absolutely on the field should have won this game. They had multiple chances to. Now they got to turn around and face Oregon at home, and it doesn't get any easier from there.
14-0 was the score just a couple minutes into the first quarter. It wasn't that Tech was asleep at the wheel to start. They just then put it in cruise control. And I guess Wyoming, I don't know if they have HOV lanes up there in Laramie, but boy, they, put the blinker on and sped, quickly caught up to the Red Raiders and then eventually passed them. The newbies go 4-0. Houston upsets UTSA. We wondered what Vegas knew. The line was only 1.5 when we picked it.
They knew Frank Harris was going to throw 3 interceptions.
Only the second time in his illustrious career that he's thrown 3 picks. He looked terrible. UTSA's offense couldn't get off the ground. They fall to the Cougars 17-14. Cincinnati drubs Eastern Kentucky 66-13. Emory Jones has a great day in his Cincinnati debut, one of the nation's leaders in QBR. UCF blows out Kent State. Thank you to a late cover play for the Knights. We were watching that with quite the ferocious intensity late. I posited, what was it, maybe early in the third quarter, how on earth is this over not going to hit? It's only at 55. And then it took to the waning moments for that to hit. Kent State had no intention of helping out on the offensive scoreboard. John Reese Plumlee, 371 yards and 4 total touchdowns as well. And then BYU, one of the shakiest games of maybe in program history. 14-0 win over Sam Houston. That was with Sam's quarterback throwing 3 interceptions. Trey, as you noted before we hit record, I just kept thinking the ESPN app wasn't updating because it was 7-0 for the longest time. And no, it was right. The Cougars just couldn't score. But the newbies do go 4-0. Elsewhere around the Big 12, nothing really remarkable. Texas, we'll talk more about them in the next episode when we get ready to preview the Longhorns going to Tuscaloosa. A slow start for Texas, beating Rice 37-10, but the defense was elite. I will give them that cap nod. The concern coming out of this game, Quinn continues to struggle throwing the deep ball. And if you're not able to pick apart the Alabama secondary, I don't think their running game is going to be strong enough this early in the season to beat the Tide. Oklahoma State does terrible things to Arkansas State. Did you guys see Butch Jones immediately turns around and blames his players?
Oklahoma did stuff to Arkansas.
I'm sorry, Oklahoma. Yeah.
We'll get Oklahoma State didn't do terrible things to anybody yesterday.
No, they did not. Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner, 73, Arkansas State, 0. Yeah, Butch Jones is getting consoled by his students, his team on the sideline, and then in the press conference turns around and blames his players for not showing up. We made the joke that maybe he's building something. Maybe he could turn it around at Arkansas State. I say kick him out. I don't think there's any reason for Butch Jones to have a job much longer after that.
I have long said that Butch Jones is a class act, and I will stand by that. Okay, that's a classy man right there, coaching Arkansas State.
He hands out cash like nobody else does.
Exactly.
Kansas State blows out SEMO 45-0. Kansas beats Missouri State 48-17. Oklahoma State, thank you, does not do bad things to Central Arkansas. It's only a 27-13 victory there. And Iowa State 30-9. Trey, I'll let you choose to decide to air your comment or simply pass on it, but they did score some points in this game.
I'll refrain from commenting until the Cyhawk game next week. We'll save some time there.
30-9 over Northern Iowa. ACC scores, some more unremarkable scores. We have to start out by saying fly the flag. Northern Illinois 27, Boston College 24 in overtime. The most entertaining game on this slate was Louisville coming back to beat Georgia Tech. We were all riding the Ramblin' Wreck. I even tweeted a graphic out about it. We were going to the postseason, baby. This was game 1 of a 6-6 schedule. And then, Georgia Tech does Georgia Tech things. Haynes King, that timer for pass rush just does not seem to go off with him. He had such a good game until the late in the third and all through the fourth when the offense went away. Louisville ends up pulling this one out 39-34. Garrett, again, your ex-lover giving you a chance to take her back. Any comment from you there?
Not on Louisville, at least, no. I thought overall Georgia Tech played a good game, but man, just disappeared in the second half on offense. Haynes King had over 200 yards in the first half, and I was sitting there, I'm like, where was this Haynes King at A&M? Where was this Chase Lane? Chase Lane had a long, pass, and they talked about how they were teammates at A&M for like 5 minutes on the broadcast. Not a great broadcast, by the way, but I'll let that sit. And then, man, they disappear. I mean, Haynes King had like 40 yards total passing the entire second half before that last little drive that they kind of gave it up. They're playing prevent defense, and it is what it is. But no, not a great effort there to finish that game, obviously. But you gotta give Louisville the credit. They did come back. Whatever they said at halftime worked, and came back, clawed back, and ended up winning this game.
Trey, Brett Gabbert said a bunch of things in front of a microphone a couple weeks ago, and then did not cash that check. Miami, Florida beats Miami of Ohio 31-3. Listen, man, if you're going to say you're going to prove you're the real Ohio, I think you got to score at least one touchdown to qualify. They did not do that. The Hurricanes looked okay against a Red Hawks team that can't play defense, but a good week 1 tune-up leading into their week 2 matchup against Texas A&M. Yeah,
ran the ball really well. Didn't lose to Miami, Ohio. That's all that you can ask really for Miami at this point.
Talked about Northern Illinois. Shout out to the Huskies for knocking off a bad Boston College team on the road. Fly the flag. Wake Forest beats Elon 37-17. Pitt beats Wofford 45-7. Syracuse blows out Colgate 65-0. And one of you just typed in maybe the most important stat of this entire weekend. Syracuse has now taken the lead in the all-time series. Trey, you were telling us going into that game they were tied because of games back in the 30s or something like that. But Syracuse definitively takes the lead in that series. I think the Orange got to feel really good about that.
Absolutely. I think that was the 68th time they'd ever played. And finally Syracuse gets something to brag about in this rivalry.
The last game broke my heart. Virginia Tech 36, Old Dominion 17. While I'm really thrilled that the Hokies can score on offense, I was not thrilled that the over on this cash. That was one of my ledger bets. I was just sure that after last year's defensive catastrophe, we wouldn't have to worry about the over hitting. But Allie Jenkins and Grant Wells went to town. They scored 36 to beat Old Dominion in convincing fashion. 3 group of 5 games to get to very quickly before we wrap up here. It's after midnight here on in God's time zone. We're ready to go to bed, but 3 more games to talk about. Tulane convincingly beat South Alabama 37-17. I got this game all wrong. I took the Jags plus 6.5. I told you take them outright, and that could not have been further from the truth. Michael Pratt, despite losing multiple options on the offensive side and a couple of key linebackers, Nick Anderson, Dorian Williams, on the defensive side, Tulane stepped up and looks like the group of 5 contender with UTSA going down. We'll talk about SMU in just a moment, but how impressed were you guys with the Green Wave?
I loved that they picked up right where they left off. They've got a really tricky non-conference schedule with South Alabama this week. They play Ole Miss next week at home. Lots of fun could be had, though. I really like where they're at right now, and it was a really impressive statement win for Tulane this week.
Yeah, stuff was real fun on the Big Easy. I was still big on Tulane on this one. I thought that they were going to keep going, and sure enough, they did. And that's not to take anything away from South Alabama. That's a really good team, but Tulane's a good team. This is the team that beat USC, and you don't do that just because you got a running back that, left you. That's, he was a stud. Tyjae Spears is a stud, but look, Pratt was amazing. 17, the receiver, I can't remember his name right now, but 17 looked real good in that game. And so, I'm excited to see what Tulane can do. Go ahead, put Ole Miss on upset watch because, they looked good. They scored a lot of points, but put them on upset watch. Tulane's got a real good defense. They're going to play some good football.
Putting up 37 on one of the best defenses in the group of 5 from a season ago. Certainly impressive in week 1. SMU beat La Tech 38-14. Garrett, we were at this game for the first half before we started to fry like eggs. Preston Stone looked good, although we were kind of wishing they had let him cook a little bit more. The deep throws weren't in the playbook, but then again, SMU didn't exactly need it. Scoring points was not difficult for them against the Bulldogs.
Yeah, and he had a couple deep passes, which I was excited about. He had that one for I think it was the second touchdown they scored. Deep pass, looked like there could have been PI called. There wasn't, and he ends up scoring that one. Also had a really impressive pass to RJ Maryland as we were leaving because we weren't about to sit in that 100 heat anymore and watch Louisiana Tech just continue to get stomped. So apologies, SMU. We did not stick around for the second half, but nobody stuck around for the second half. Most of y'all students didn't even stick around for the first quarter. So we'll call you out there too. It was hot. It was fine. That's leave the game. Don't die. But no, SMU looked really good. Defense was really impressive for me for SMU. Really got to the quarterback. Bachmeier was not comfortable the entire day. He was just running around, lots of pressure on them. I was really excited about SMU coming into the year. Still excited about them. Think they're going to have a good year.
If SMU can play defense, boy, they will be a dangerous team in their final year in the American. Certainly one of our favorites to go to the New Year's Six bowl game. They're the team that I've been hyping up the most as well over on Twitter. Ponies, we're ready for week 1. Trey, final game. You breathed a massive sigh of relief as Western Kentucky came back to beat South Florida 41-24. You were hanging on to your butts there at the very end. South Florida inside the red zone trying to take your cover away, but they weren't able to do it. You hang on to win that game.
Yeah, just a great feeling when a bad beat goes your way, right? And Western Kentucky had no business winning this game, let alone covering. They messed around the entire time, then got a scoop and score, and somehow held the Bulls out of the end zone at the end for the cover. Awesome finish to the game for the Hilltoppers and my Ledger cause. That's
right. Trey right now currently sitting for the moment in the catbird seat. We're waiting on Garrett's parlay with Duke to see if that hits tomorrow night. So as you're listening to this, we still don't have the results of the Clemson Duke game. That will be a YouTube exclusive recap. Excuse me. We'll put that up on our YouTube channel after that game goes final. Garrett is hoping to retake that lead. I am 0-8 in my ledger bets so far. I've got something.
Nowhere to go but up, Mitch. Nowhere to go but up.
That's right. That's right. Well, last week
or next week.
We thought we were going to keep everything between the mustard and the mayo. That didn't happen this week.
Yeah.
Got really close on a number of the bets, but like UNT, UTSA letting me down. Rutgers, I told you Rutgers would take care of business. Never a doubt there, but when that's the only thing you get in a parlay, that's not going to cash at the window. Guys, my voice is going away, so I think that's time for us to wrap. Great week one. Phenomenal week one, despite the lack of ranked matches. Hey, if that's all you care about, look to week two. Tune in on Thursday morning. We'll have your week two preview coming for you. It's going to be a really, really exciting week. For Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How